Or Jean-Claude, what is your recommended posting on Facebook as far as 1 a day, 2 a day, 1 every other day?
Okay, 2 years ago, I said post twice a day. 3 weeks ago, I said post once a day. And now I say post twice a week, either on your personal profile and on Facebook groups. That's enough. Why? Because you want to make people attentive. They will say, all right, I know that Monday you will be posting something I'm interested in. So don't overdo it. So that's working. Second recommendation, post Monday to Wednesday, because the algorithm is better. And people, when they are working in their office or they are commuting, they watch Facebook, they read Facebook. So if you post something on Friday, you have 1/3 of the results that you have on the Monday. And Saturday, Sunday, forget.
Kirk,
yes.
You mentioned in your talk that you had some of the actors that you guided in free diving that actually had, I'm not sure if I understood correctly, but phobias, or at least they were scared of water. I was wondering how do you deal with that?
Basically unlock their potential and show them what they can do. So Bailey Bass was one of the youth members of the principal cast. And I did a casting with her. So I had 30 some kids that I took through a session in the pool, and I graded them and basically gave that to James Cameron, on what their abilities are and that sort of thing. And Bailey was probably one or two from the bottom. She couldn't equalize. She didn't like it. In fact, after she was selected and we'd be training, it would be, so are we done yet? She just didn't enjoy it, but they all had computers on. And this one session we did, and I could see her going beyond the best time she had ever done. And she kept on going, and I could see her having fun. And she looked at her computer and she's like, oh my God. And then I saw her look around, and she kept on going and looking at her computer, and she came up. And when I said, okay, so that's it for the day, she was like, do we have to stop now? And I was like, yes. Right. And it was the transformation. And so sometimes that was just bringing out of them what the full potential they could have, realizing that they have this ability and they become stars. And that's where it really.
So really for her, in her case, it wasn't so much that she didn't like it. She just didn't like the feeling of not being able to do it. And then once she knew that she did it, she could do it.
And then she was inspired to do more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Kirk. Simon here. Excuse my croaky voice.
Okay.
Kirk, to your knowledge, has there ever been an oxygen toxic seizure in technical free diving? And as an extension to that question, what assumption do you make about the dose of oxygen that the free diver is receiving, breathing, say, a 32 mix before the dive, in comparison to a diver with scuba who's breathing a 32 mix at depth?
Yeah. So I don't know of any oxygen toxicity issues while technical free diving. We at Deja Blue, we keep all of our oxygen as a surface oxygen, because I don't know people who are necessarily scuba trained or not. I know there's some competitions where or individuals who untrained will be using oxygen at depth, right? They might use it at 5 meters, and a little bit of change on 100% oxygen can make quite a difference in the PO2. And then as far as the exposure of it, I guess I look at it like a rain barrel, right? If I've got a rain barrel that tall, and out the spout is the pressure of that. When I'm the scuba diver, my rain barrel's that big. But when I'm the free diver, my rain barrel's that big. But the spigot at the bottom still has the same pressure, but the load on the free diver versus the load on the scuba diver, I think that makes the difference. So when we look at the records right now, we routinely run, like they're, what, 220 some feet, 65, 67 meters would be air at 1.6, I think, if I remember correctly. And that's like a mid-level. That's a mid-level competitor in freediving. We're routinely in the 100-meter plus range. So clearly we're able to go beyond 1.6 as a PO2. For now, we are sticking to that within our program simply because that's a diving standard. But can we go further than that? We do it all the time on air. Should we be doing it on an actual mixture with, more load? That's really the question, right?
Yeah, I think that that's a very reasonable assumption, and you probably saw it, but in the experiment we did where we took an arterial blood gas specimen from a free diver on air at 60 meters, his arterial oxygen was less than half what you'd expect. It was still high, but it was less than half what you'd expect for a scuba diver breathing air at that depth. So I think that these assumptions you're making are actually pretty safe. And I suspect that although the risk is not zero, the risk of oxygen toxicity in free diving is probably small, even with the technical stuff that you're doing.
So just to expand on that a little bit more, Simon, one of the things is if I'm using a high percentage mixture, let's say I'm using 100%, and then I'm going to go back down to 60 meters. Well, I go off that 100% mixture for a period of time. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to normalize alveolar oxygen. We're trying to get that to air or whatever my low mix will be for the maximum operating depth I'm working to. And one of the things we do in our Deja Blue competition is for any non-trained competitor, they don't have to be technical trained or anything, but they're supervised by one of our safety supervisors, and they're allowed 5-minute complimentary, 100% oxygen after their main target dive. But then if they're going to do that 5 minutes on O2, and then they're going to go to a warm-up line to work on a technique, they're told to be off, and they're monitored to be off for no less than 5 minutes for normalization. But one of the things we've done, 3 of us, we did 100% oxygen for 5 minutes, and then we went off for 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, breathed into a bag that had an oxygen analyzer. And the 3 of us did that 3 times each. And then we did 4 minutes off, and then and all the way. And 2 minutes was that sweet spot where at 2 minutes, normalized air, all of us would show, except one time we showed like 23% in one person. So we said 2 minutes is the safe time in which to move to the low mix or to air. And that's how we figured out the 2 minutes.
Question for Kirk.
Yeah.
While monitoring free diving, normal free diving in air, our experience is with the main recurring problems that they incur, and that is pulmonary edema. And we found that about 25% of our experimental subjects actually suffer from that, either by feeling a metallic flavor in their mouth, and this is common for example, for the swimmers, the synchronized swimmers and so on, and they have very long performances underwater, exercising and so on, and also in the Apnea Academy and AIDA fellow subjects that we studied. Not to speak about the oxygen variations that we could monitor with underwater broad draw. Are you considering to study that? Because it would be interesting to see whether with your technique, these problems are reduced, are the same, are different. And what we're doing, we are studying lung comets with lung echography, both after the dive, before and after, and now also during the dive, because we have submersible echographs that we used at the Y40 pool and in Dubai. Have you considered that? Or have your divers ever reported any such problem?
Yeah, it happens in diving. We have policies and procedures that govern how soon we should, how long we're out of the water and that sort of thing. When it comes to the technical freediving component of that, it's a really good question. I can tell you that we haven't had anyone that has experienced a pulmonary edema or thoracic squeeze, the way we like to refer to it, when utilizing technical freediving. So that's actually a really good question. I think largely that would be because most of the people we're training right now are at high levels, very experienced, and there's no predisposition to that in the first place. But as technical freediving moves into the wider freediving audience, then whether we see a reduction in that, that's a really good question and certainly one to consider.
Would be interesting to plan a joint study, maybe.
Absolutely.
We would be happy to monitor you.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. Yeah.
A question for Kirk. You mentioned in your talk that you trained David Blaine and he spent 17 minutes without breathing before he had spent 23, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he'd done 24 minutes
24
before,
minutes,
and he
okay.
did 17 for the world
So,
Guinness record.
My question is, how do you train someone apparently inexperienced to do that? Because it almost sounds a bit superhuman. Because I have this idea that when you're an athlete, you spend a long time to develop your skill until you reach a certain level, right? And that sounds like a whole lot of potential for a short period of time.
Yeah, so I mean, what I find works best is gentle pressure on the back of the head to help people stay a long time under the water. No, so I trained David Blaine for over 6 months leading up to Drowned Alive. And that was his full-time job for 6 months. So I gave him training programs, dry programs, gym programs, breath hold programs, dry breath holds. We had a hypoxic tent to simulate altitude to help recovery and a whole bunch of things like that. So just don't think that I met him and 1 week later we were doing that. We trained him as a free diver. I mean, a 7-minute plus breath hold diver on air, getting him up to that point to then switch over to the oxygenated aspect of it. So you really have to develop as a free diver on air first to then pull that ace out of your sleeve, to then switch into that, because you have to get all of the advantages of the diving reflex, the bradycardia, the compression of the spleen, the vascular network constricting and dilating, and the changing of chemoreceptors, the ability to handle high levels of carbon dioxide. But one of the things we have to realize when we're using technical freediving, other than 100% oxygen will dull our chemoreceptors' response to carbon dioxide. So we can handle a higher level of carbon dioxide than you normally would. That also happens with training effect of just holding your breath and working in high carbon dioxide environments. But, you know, we really need to train the body to respond, to adapt, to be very conservative with oxygen. And then there's the psychological component as well. So yeah, high level of just normal free diver breath hold training to then switch to the oxygen component of it. And that's the exact same thing that I did on Avatar. We went months just becoming free divers before we started utilizing the advantages of 50 or 80%.
So you would say that there's a major psychological like influence. So you mentioned now the psychological factor. Would you say that that's like one of the most important factors, maybe?
Yeah, it's definitely contributing. I mean, you have to imagine breath hold is part of your primal fears, right? Your fear of falling, your fear of being eaten, and your fear of suffocation. And so in our flight, our autonomic reflexes and you know, all of that aspect of it, we have to retrain that fight or flight reflex at the same time as we're training the physiology. And with psychological comfort, you relax more, which allows the diving reflex to get better. And when that gets better, the psychology is supported, and it's kind of this positive feedback loop.
Yes, a question really for Jean-Claude, and it's a question on accepting friends on Facebook. So I'm sure everyone here has probably got friends on their Facebook. They have no idea who they are. Yeah. So like when I have somebody ask me for a friendship and I look at their profile and it says, you know, like 2,000 mutual friends, I think, and I look at the photo of their profile and they're covered in cylinders and on some 300-meter dive, I think, well, it's pretty obvious that they're a legitimate person. So I'll accept that friendship. Then I'll get another one. It will probably say some guy from West Africa. I have no idea who he is. One mutual friend, Simon Mitchell, or something like that. And I think, well, you know, Simon might be stupid, but I'm not falling for that one. So my question to you is, it's a two-part question, really. How do you whittle out those people? How do you know if they're genuine people? Because I have a few that might be 60 mutual friends. But how do you whittle out if that's a genuine person? And the second part of the question is, if they're not a genuine person, what are they trying to accept your friendship for? And what can they do if they're not a genuine person? Is it a scam or something like that? Because what I do is I go to their profile and have a look and see if they've got any links to any other people that they know. But can you advance on that at all? If you know.
Well, I think that's a very good point, because first of all, you do the right thing. You check their profile. Checking the profile will take you maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes. You don't need to dig too deep, but you will see if they have something in relation to your perfect avatar, your ideal client somehow. They are linked to your activity. If that's the case, that's good. If they have mutual friends, that's another indicator. I prefer to search for friends than to accept friends. Because then I bring friends in that I know, okay, they match my perfect client. Now, of course, you get people asking for friendship. You have to have the right mix. But sometimes you will accept someone and you think maybe it's not my perfect client, but you may question that, first of all. You may communicate with that person, but it could be your client because he's interested about what you are doing. So you have to do that search. Now, if this person is not interacting with your profile, eliminate that person. So how do you check that? Basically, if you accept somebody and you say, well, let's say I'm reaching my limits, because you don't need to show how many people are friends with you. And I would like to know why you want to become friends with me. What is your interest? And are you going to be active on my profile? Ask this question. If they don't respond, then of course you can eliminate them. If they respond and they tell you why, then it gives you an indicator. You want active people on your profile. So that's what you want to achieve. More comments, more reactions.
So if it is somebody that is a spammer or a fake profile, is there anything that they can do on your profile to damage?
You can manage that. Your settings, your Facebook settings on your personal profiles have to be done that only you are able to post something. You don't let anybody else posting. You don't share any of your personal information, like your phone or whatever. So this you can eliminate, and you have the full control. If people right now are posting on your profile, you don't have that setting set the way it should be, and then they could spam. They could start to sell crypto, right? You don't want to have that. So make sure that only you are posting and so on. You don't want to have anybody sharing on your profile. If you want to share something, that's you sharing from somebody else. That's fine. But you have to have the full control. Otherwise, you go that risk.